On Thanksgiving night, my own daughter pressed down on my shoulder and shoved me from the chair. "That seat is for my mother-in-law. Move." My plate skidded, cranberry sauce bled across the white tablecloth, and the gravy boat kissed the china with a sharp, humiliating clink. The football on TV droned through the living room while the dining room went silent, save for the scrape of my chair against the hardwood. I, Margaret Davis, 66, steadied my hip against the mahogany edge as the smell of sage stuffing, butter, and orange peel turned strangely sour. Evan just stared, his hands hovering uselessly, and Carol, his mother, smoothed her napkin, eyes gleaming like she'd finally been crowned. Ashley kept her hostess smile plastered on, teeth barely moving as she hissed, "Please don't make a scene, Mom." The candles threw shaky gold over the lacquered turkey skin, the good silver I gave her as a wedding gift glinting like it belonged to someone else. My hip throbbed where the chair caught me, and the November draft from the cracked window needled my back. My grandson's fork hung mid-air, freckles tight with worry, while my granddaughter traced the maple leaf pattern on her plate like it could open a door. Every little thing I taught Ashley, how to slice pie clean, how to keep the rolls warm under a towel, floated above us like a list of debts unpaid. This didn't start with a shove. It started with a seating chart I wasn't meant to see and a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. Before we carve into that, I'll show you how gratitude turned into territory, how a place at the table became proof of loyalty. I'll take you back to the texts, the whispered, "We owe her this," and the quiet ways I was uninvited while still being asked to bring the pie. Stay with me, and you'll understand how a mother can be erased one polite decision at a time until there's nowhere left to sit. If you believe a mother's seat should never be optional, subscribe and stay close for stories like this. I reached for the gravy boat before it spilled and righted it with both hands. Careful, the way you catch a restless baby, with the same hush in your breathing. My hip burned, a hot little flare under the dress I'd ironed that morning, and the cranberry sauce spread into a watery red lake that licked the edges of my place setting. Carol dabbed at the tablecloth with the corner of her napkin, as if she were correcting a small child, and smiled without showing teeth. Evan still didn't move. Ashley's hand hovered near my elbow like a traffic cop's palm. I straightened, placed the gravy back on its saucer, and folded the linen napkin that had slipped into my lap. The television murmured from the living room, crowd noise rising and falling, while the house itself seemed to pull its breath in, every wall leaning toward this table. "Mom," Ashley said, her voice landing softly, but firm, rehearsed. "Please just sit at the end by the window, okay?" I looked at the window. It was drafty, the old frame painted shut years ago, a visible hairline of air that found every sweater seam. They had tucked a little pumpkin on the sill with a gold letter C painted on it. A monogram from some craft store, not ours. My chair scraped again as I eased it back into place and gave Ashley the space she seemed to need to crown someone. Carol's hand slid into the newly cleared spot with a certainty that made the forks beside her clink. Her perfume, something powdery with a sweet top, rose like an extra guest and took the head of the table. I didn't protest. I did what I have done since the day I learned to read a room before I read my own heart. I made myself small. I took my plate, lifted it with care so nothing sloshed into anyone's lap, and walked around the table to the end, near the cracked window. The chair there was one of the folding ones from the basement, a metal thing with a beige vinyl seat that remembered every warm body it ever held. My grandson's eyes followed me, big and brown and worried, and my granddaughter's finger kept tracing the maple leaf pattern on her plate like a prayer. I settled myself, adjusted the cushions I had brought from home because Ashley's dining chairs sit too low for my knees, and told my face to do something both pleasant and neutral. For the 100th time since September, I reminded myself that a mother who wants to be invited back learns to be quiet in small rooms. "Grace," Carol chirped, as if she were offering a party trick. "Yes, that would be lovely," Evan said, eager, quick. He is polite in a way that often looks like absence. I bowed my head and held my own hands. I have said grace off and on my entire life. When my own mother died, I said it daily for a while, even over a bowl of cereal, trying to keep some thread tethered. When Ashley was little, she said it like a song before her bedtime fish sticks. "Give thanks, give thanks, give thanks again," she'd chant, banging her fork and giggling. I could see that little girl now, tucked behind the woman smoothing the hem of a linen dress she probably ordered in July. Carol's voice lifted into the cadence of someone who enjoys speaking in front of people. "Lord, thank you for this table, for family old and new, and for traditions, for the reminders of who we are and what we honor." Her eyes flicked to me when she said traditions. It wasn't even a hard flick. It was soft, practiced. My mother used to say there are two kinds of rudeness, the crash and the velvet. This was velvet. You don't notice until the nap wears thin. Ashley carved the turkey, the knife held the way I showed her, just so, the blade close to the bone, so each slice had that edge of crisp skin. Every little thing I taught her was at that table wearing another woman's name. The rolls were under a towel in a basket by the stove, the way I have always kept them, my mother's trick. The cranberry sauce had orange zest and the tiniest pinch of clove, because without clove, it tastes like the color red and nothing else. The sweet potatoes were topped with little brown pillows of marshmallow. That one was Carol's way. The green bean casserole wore its own crown of onions from a can. I gave Ashley the silver on her wedding day because my mother had done that for me. I gave it polishing cloths, instructions, traditions folded into metal. Now it winked up at me like it belonged to someone else, like it had never lived in the drawer by my stove in Columbus, like it had never tapped against the sides of the sink while my child sang herself into being in the next room. I took a breath, let my chin anchor, and ate. Around me the conversation unfroze, resuming at a level just high enough to be a show of ease. Carol told a story about a gala at her club, about the charity auction, and the centerpiece nobody could stop talking about. Evan laughed at the right moment. Ashley murmured about floral foam. My granddaughter leaned into me and whispered, "Nana, are you cold? I can get you my hoodie." I squeezed her hand. "I'm fine, darling," I said. "The stuffing will do the trick." I have never believed that gratitude requires silence, but I have spent years acting as if it does. That's what good women do in houses that aren't theirs. In October, when the leaves were still crunchy and the air smelled like pencil shavings, Ashley invited me to the house to help with planning. She fussed over a list at the kitchen island: smooth white quartz, oranges piled in a bowl no one would actually eat from, and asked if I could bring pies. "Apple and pumpkin, please. It would be special if they were yours." She said yours the way a person does when they have replaced my name with a list of tasks. I nodded, because pie is the one thing that still feels like mine even when I hand it to someone else. "I'll bring the pie," I said, steady because it was something agreeable to stand on. "I'll be there early to help with the turkey, if you need me." "Oh, Carol's coming early," she said, casual. "She wants to do her sweet potato thing in the oven before the turkey goes back in to finish. She has a timing spreadsheet. It's so helpful. It would be great if you came around noon. We're doing appetizers at 2. I made a little noise to show I heard. Noon would be time enough to set out plates and fold napkins. We stood there for a moment in the bright kitchen, her phone turned face down on the counter. That's when the face lit up and a text preview scrolled across, pretending to be shy. "We owe her this," it said. That was all that fit in the bubble before it faded. I didn't look any harder than my eyes forced me to. I have known how to give people privacy since I was a girl who learned to knock even on doors with no locks. But texts are carelessly loud things. They want to be seen. Ashley's mouth tightened the way it does when she gets more than she wants and less than she needs. She must have seen my eyes flick toward the phone. She picked it up, locked it, and said, "Mom, could you get the pie plates down for me? The tall ones you use?" Like always, she pressed the soft spot, asked me to do something only I could do because of what I kept. While I stood on the little step stool and reached for the glass pie plates with their scalloped edges, I noticed a sheet of paper tucked under the whale magnet. It was a sketch of the dining table, as if the table were a stage and the chairs had names like characters. I shouldn't have noticed. I shouldn't have read. But my eyes grazed the ink the way eyes do when their owner has been hungry for her own place for too long. The head of the table. Evan. To his right, Carol. To his left, Ashley. A question mark had been by my name and then erased. A faint pencil ghost hovered by the end near the window. Mom, it said. Not even my name. Kids, it said next to me, as if I were a leaf on a family tree that had been moved down to the next generation. A small arrow in the margin. Remind Evan, traditions matter. In the little box on the bottom, in smaller writing, 2 bullet points. Ask Mom to bring pie. Seat flow, don't let it get weird. Don't let it get weird. I stood there on the step stool with my hand in the cabinet, holding a dish that had held every Thanksgiving of my child's childhood, and I felt my ribs tip inward. I climbed down without a sound. I told myself that I was being foolish. That seating charts didn't hold the truth the way they pretend to. That some people put the cranberry sauce in a bowl and some people keep it in the shape of the can, and everyone still eats dinner. Then, on Monday, I came by with a bag of cranberries and extra napkin rings in case she needed them. I am always the in-case person, and the door was slightly open. It left a tunnel of warm air out into the bright afternoon. Ashley was in the laundry room. I heard her before I saw her. The dryer hummed like a fat cat. Her voice rose and fell. I should have called out immediately. I should have set down the bag and rattled something. But I am 66 now, and not as quick as I think I am. I stood there halfway between one room and the next, and let the words find me. I just don't want to hurt her, Ashley said, whispering the word hurt like it had teeth. But Carol keeps saying the head of the table sets the tone. And we owe her. This is the first year she's not flying to Florida because of us. She said it's a symbol. She said, if your mother can be gracious about it, that tells me a lot. Carol's voice floated up, not from Ashley's phone then, but from inside Ashley's voice, like an aftertaste. I didn't need to hear any more. I backed out of the hallway and made my shoe squeak deliberately when I crossed the threshold. Ashley came into the kitchen, cheeks pink as if she'd run up the stairs. Oh, Mom, I didn't hear you. You're early. I brought extra napkin rings, I said, just in case. She smiled with all the corners and none of the light. So thoughtful. Thank you. On Wednesday night, I rolled pie dough on my little counter, the one that slopes toward the sink because the land shifts in old buildings when they want you to move along. I moved to this apartment 2 years ago to be closer to Ashley and the kids when Evan's job brought them here. I sold my little house with the porch swing in Columbus and gave Ashley and Evan some of my nest egg for their down payment because the rates were good then, and I wanted my grandchildren in a yard with a fence and a maple tree. I did not say, here is the money my mother left me. I did not say, here is the ring your father gave me, the only thing of his I kept besides your middle name, which I pawned when you were 21 and your student loan came due early and you couldn't breathe. I said, here, for closing costs, with a shrug, like it was an extra pie. I rubbed cold butter into flour until it looked like wet sand and smelled like nothing. I measured with my hands the way my mother did, letting the tumble of sugar and spice tell me when to stop. I thought of every Thanksgiving when it was just the two of us. The years when your father was gone, and I worked the early shift at the hospital cafeteria to get the turkey in the oven by 11, and we ate at 4 at our wobbly round table with the plug-in candle shaped like a real one because I didn't want to worry about you reaching. I thought of how you used to fall asleep on the couch with your socks inside out from ice skating at the park, your hair smelling like wind and hot chocolate. I thought of all the times I was small, so you had room to grow. I took the pies out of the oven on Thursday morning and watched the pumpkin puff and relax. The edges of the crust were golden, the smell warm enough to fill a house twice this size. The Macy's parade floated across my old little TV in the corner, balloons bobbing in the gray Manhattan sky. I sipped coffee from a cup with a chip on the rim that fits my bottom lip just so. I tied 2 pies into one of those cloth carriers someone gave me at a church fair 15 years ago and pulled my good coat over my sweater. On the way out, I looked at the box on top of the refrigerator, the one marked with a piece of masking tape that reads, Christmas lights. I always wait until after Thanksgiving to bring it down. It is one of my firmest rules. I set my hand on it and then I left it where it was, afraid that this year even the lights would feel like a bad rumor. When I walked into Ashley's house at noon, Carol was already perched on a bar stool with a glass of white wine, telling Ashley how long to let the turkey rest between oven and table. Evan brushed past me with the basting spoon, his eyes somewhere between the kitchen island and the toaster. The kids ran up and hugged me, and I put the pies on the counter and one hand around each little head and took a breath so deep I could feel my mother's hands come up under mine. Steady, steady. "Mom," Ashley said, bustling, kissing me on the cheek without letting herself slow. "You look so pretty." She always says pretty when she wants me not to fight. I set the pies down. "I brought the whipped cream you like," I said. "Fresh, not the can." "Oh, perfect," she said. "Carol has the canned kind too. She says the kids like that. It's fun. Thank you for the pies. We'll put them out after dinner." She glanced at me then the way you check the weather on your phone before you leave the house. If there's a chance of rain, you take an umbrella. If there's a chance of Margaret finding her voice, you put me by the window. We all know what happened at the table. Bodies and chairs, and the soft little crown that comes when you're given something you asked for with your eyes and not your mouth. My plate still had a Pilgrim Boy on the rim from when Ashley bought them at Target, because they were nostalgic. He looked up at me with a smile that had no teeth. Now, at my end of the table, the turkey went around, and I served myself less than I wanted. The stuffing was salty, the cranberries were perfect, the rolls were warm. My hands have always had something to do at a table. If not feeding someone, then fixing something, then passing. When I finally looked up, I caught Carol watching me. Not mean, not even unkind. Measuring. She has this idea that families have shapes, and she redraws the outlines lightly, as if with chalk, until everyone stands where she wants. She has raised 2 sons and a daughter, and has flown back and forth to Florida for the winter for years. She knows exactly what she wants things to look like. "It's so nice we can make room for everyone," she said, smiling at Ashley as if she'd just mastered a craft. "You're such a gracious hostess." Ashley's face glowed at this praise. I remember that glow from the first time she wrote her name without help, and I clapped too loudly in the school hallway. Children are praise's oldest vessels. Some of us never stop trying to keep them filled. "I love how you set the table," Carol added, her eyes landing on the place cards. Heavy cardstock with little gold edges, names done in a calligraphy that Ashley learned from a book because she thought people would respect hand-lettered things. She had put Grandma Carol on Carol's and Nana on mine. Titles are masks. They hide the same mouths. "We did little acorns on the napkins," my granddaughter said, proud. "That's beautiful," I told her. "You have your mother's hands." Ashley looked at me as if that sentence was both a gift and a test. I wanted to say, "You have my hands." But mothers must be careful about ownership. We raise people to throw us away. We call it independence and pride, and we celebrate it on big days and eat turkey and clap while someone else sits at the head of the table. Halfway through dinner, Evan reached for the gravy and knocked a fork to the floor. It clattered, and he flinched. "Sorry," he said to no one. The kids were quiet the way kids get when they know the room is balanced on something breakable. "So," Carol said, smoothing her napkin again, "we were talking about Christmas. You know we always do Christmas Eve at our place. We could, of course, include everyone." She made the word an offering and a test. "But it's a long drive for some people." "It's 40 minutes, I said, before I could stop myself. I had promised my mouth I would be careful tonight. "I can leave early and come back early. I don't drive after 9. Ashley tilted her head, a look she learned from me when she was 16. "We'll figure it out," she said quickly, cutting the thread before it could pull something apart. "Evan, could you pass the peas?" I leaned back so the peas could pass. The window breathed on my shoulder, and I remembered the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after we sang Christmas Eve at church, who fell asleep on my chest to the sound of my heart. I remembered her sticky hand inside my winter glove, how warm a small life can be. After dinner, there's always that moment when the table hangs between second helpings and dessert, when the men want football and the women, if we let that old shape hold, carry plates to the sink. Carol stood and gathered her plate and Evan's, like she was still teaching him something that didn't take. Ashley reached for mine. At the last second, her hand paused. Mom, would you mind taking this into the kitchen? Carol has a system. There it was, not a shove, a shape. I stood, took my plate, and walked to the sink. The kitchen was warm in that worked-hard way that always feels like home to me, no matter whose house it is. The dishwasher was open, its racks pulled out like a tongue. I turned on the tap and rinsed the plates the way my hands do without asking. Behind me, Carol and Ashley's voices sifted into the room. Carol laughed, light. You did the right thing, she said. Boundaries are love. You're such a good daughter, Ashley. I stood and let the water run warm over my hands and thought of every boundary I have erased to make room for my child. If love is a fence, mine has always been the picket kind you can step over if you need to. I dried my hands and took the pies out of their cloth carrier. I set them on the island and ran the back of the knife lightly across the top of the pumpkin, the way my mother did, to keep the first slice from tearing. Ashley came in carrying a stack of plates, talking over her shoulder. She stopped when she saw me. Oh, good, she said, as if she'd surprised a helpful stranger. I was worried your crust might be, but it looks perfect. I cut, served, wiped the knife between slices, the movements themselves a kind of prayer. The kids ran back into the kitchen now that the serious part was over. My granddaughter licked a spot of whipped cream off her thumb with the solemnity of a scientist. That one is mine, my grandson said, pointing to the piece with the tallest dollop. It certainly is, I said, my voice almost steady. When the plates were filled and the table reset with smaller forks, we all gathered again. Evan complimented the crust and meant it. Carol took a bite and closed her eyes, theatrical. Oh, this is lovely, she said. She swallowed. You always bake, don't you, Margaret? It's your tradition. I do, I said. It's how my mother loved us. Carol dabbed her mouth. My grandmother used to bake. My mother had staff. But I learned to make one thing, lemon bars. You'd like them. She looked around the table to see where that sentence landed. Ashley told a story about the time in second grade when I burned the rolls and we laughed, soft and honest, because I did. I always forget the rolls. You cannot remember everything. You cannot hold the whole thing without dropping a piece. By the time the plates were empty and the dishes stacked, my body had set itself into a kind of quiet. The kids tugged me to the living room to show me the little cardboard turkey they'd made at school, where each feather had something written on it. Friends, books, Nana. That one was blue. I touched it and my eyes did that thing eyes do when they've been waiting all day for permission. We're doing a family picture at 3, Ashley called from the kitchen. Mom, would you take it for us so we can all be in? Then, catching herself, oh, right. Maybe Evan can set the timer. I sat on the arm of the sofa and watched them push the coffee table back. Carol fussed with Ashley's hair. Evan lifted the kids into place and tickled them exactly once, enough to loosen their faces. I could have stepped into the frame and found the space they left open in their heads for this exact moment. Instead, I stood and walked to the hall closet for my scarf. The closet smelled like cedar and dust and winter coats. I reached above my head, where I always hang my scarf when I come here because it fools me into thinking this is a second home. My fingers found it, the soft blue wool, and on the shelf beside it, I saw a box. White, with Carol's name in gold foil on a little tag. The lid was slightly ajar. Inside, tissue paper crinkled like a whisper. On top, a card. To Carol for all you've done. Love, A and E. I pushed the paper back half an inch. Monogrammed linen napkins. See in gold at the corner. The same gold as the little pumpkin in the window. My mouth made a shape like the word O and didn't say it. I slid my scarf off the shelf and closed the closet gently. When I turned, my grandson stood in the hallway, watching me with the stillness I recognize from my own childhood. The particular quiet of children who know something is off and want to fix it with their presence. Do you want to hold my turkey, Nana? He asked, holding out the cardboard bird, its feathers flapping. I do, I said, taking it with both hands as if it were made of glass. I want to hold it for a good long time. We stood there together for a moment, the two of us in a small pocket of house, with the sound of football and laughter pulling at the edges. I kissed his forehead. His skin was warm like bread. "You okay?" he whispered, trying on a grown-up phrase. Who taught him that? The world does it early now. It hands kids little adult tools and calls it independence. "You okay?" is a wrench. "I am," I said, and I was, in the way that matters when there are small eyes on you. "I'm always okay when I'm near you." We went back to the living room and took the picture. I sat on the edge of an ottoman beside the Christmas tree box they'd dragged out, despite my rule. The tree would be up by nightfall. There would be pictures of it with the kids in pajamas. Carol would put her napkins away. The silver would go back into a drawer with someone else's paper slips, the kind that tell you where to sit, who you are tonight. When I finally gathered my purse and my container for leftovers, there weren't any, which is its own message. I waited at the door while Ashley helped the kids pull on coats to wave me out. Carol stood behind her, one hand on Ashley's shoulder. Evan hugged me, a quick wrap. "Text me when you get home?" he said. A line I have said to my daughter 1,000 times. I leaned in to kiss Ashley's cheek. "Thank you," I said, "for dinner, for the day." She nodded against my face. "Thank you for the pies," she said. "They were perfect." We stood there like two women in a goodbye that is bigger than the doorway can hold. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." I didn't say, "Me too." I pulled my scarf around my neck and stepped out into the thin November air. The cold met me with a small, clean shock. The sun had slipped low. The street smelled like leaves in someone's chimney. A plastic Santa lay face down in a neighbor's yard, waiting for a better time. I started the car and watched my hands on the steering wheel. They are my mother's hands, the knuckles widening a little, the skin holding maps of kitchen years. On the passenger seat, the cloth pie carrier sat emptied, folded in on itself. My phone buzzed once. A picture came through. The family, by the tree, all of them smiling. Carol's hand on Ashley's shoulder again. Evan behind them, tall, friendly. The kids in front like exclamation points. A gap on one side where, if you squinted, a mother might fit. At a red light, I turned the music down and let silence keep me company. It hummed along, not unkind. I thought of the seating chart. I thought of the phone call. I thought of 100 small scissors trimming the edge of my place until the cloth was neat. I do not want to be defined by what I am not allowed to hold. I have given and taught and softened and gone home early so others could finish the story. I have tied my daughter's apron, wiped batter from her chin, folded her into the taller bed when she crawled out of her own. I have paid tuition and co-signed and given silver and let holidays be moved to someone else's house so the drive would be easier. At home, my apartment smelled faintly of nutmeg and vinegar. I set my purse on the hook by the door and hung my scarf, and I did not turn the light on for a minute. The dark held me without asking me to be small. When I finally switched the lamp on, it painted my little living room gold, the good kind of gold, not the kind that throws shadows. I poured water into a glass and sat at the tiny table that has always fit me. I pulled a pad of paper toward me, the one I keep near the phone for grocery lists and appointments. I wrote my name at the top for practice. Margaret. It looked satisfied. I picked up the phone and stared at the message thread with Ashley. The last text from me that morning. On my way. And with Evan? Thank you for helping with the kids last week. And with Carol. There wasn't one. I thought of calling and didn't. I am too old to fight in the doorway when the coats are on. I am old enough to know that a bigger conversation is a room you open deliberately and not when dessert is cooling. Instead, I wrote what I need, not as demands, as truths. I wrote, I am your mother. I have a place. I am not asking you to push anyone out of a chair. I am asking you to make a bigger table. I wrote, I need to talk to you alone, not in a kitchen with the water running. Not between the oven timers. I wrote, I am proud of you. I have done you some wrongs by being too quiet. I wrote, There are things you do not know about what I have given, and I want you to know them, not to owe me, but to recognize the story you stand on. My pen shook a little. I smoothed the page with my palm. There are conversations you put off because you fear they will take something from you, but sometimes they give it back. Sometimes they set the table correctly, with room for seconds. I remembered a day when Ashley was 7, and she told me, with all the certainty of a child, that she could do something by herself. She was tying her sneakers for the first time without help. I watched her loop and pull and fumble. Finally, I put my hands behind my back and said, "I'm right here if you need me." She did one loop. It pulled tight. She jumped up and down, triumphant. Then she tripped on the half-tied laces and fell onto the rug and laughed. I laughed too. Then we tied them together. Both things were true. She could, and she also needed help. Tomorrow, I will call Ashley and ask her to meet me at that coffee shop with the burnt scones and the little table in the window. I will tell her the story of the Thanksgiving when we had no turkey and ate 2 roasted chickens and 1 pumpkin pie, and how grateful I was to have nothing but us. I will tell her about the ring I pawned, and the down payment I gave, and the long nights I spent in the hospital kitchen rinsing pans bigger than people. I will tell her that boundaries are fine things until they are fences that cannot be climbed by a woman with my knees. I will tell her that I am willing to learn new traditions and willing to sit wherever I am needed if I am also still seen as the woman who taught her to stir the gravy until it shines. I will tell her about the seating chart and the phone call, not as accusations, but as facts that pin a pattern. I will tell her how the word "we owe her" landed in my chest and turned into a small stone that has rolled around all week. I will tell her I want the stone back. I'll give her my stone if she gives me my name. I will ask her if she will come to my apartment on Sunday with the kids and make turkey sandwiches with extra cranberry sauce. We will use the chipped plates because they are ours. We will put up the Christmas lights after, my rule broken because I said so and no one else. I will tell her I will not move my own chair again without asking why we are moving it. I will tell her that love makes room, that the head of the table is wherever the oldest kindness sits. Tonight, I will let the apartment be quiet. I will wash my pie plates and tuck them back into the cupboard. I will turn on a small lamp and watch the light lay itself like a napkin over the room. I will sleep with my shoulders untucked. I will dream of a long table under a maple tree, with leaves falling into bowls and everyone reaching for something from the middle. I will dream of my mother's hands and my daughters and my granddaughters and how if we put them together, we can carry the heavy dish without spilling. And in the morning, I will put on my good coat and my blue scarf and I will go to the coffee shop and claim a table by the window. I will wait. I will practice the most honest sentence I know. "Ashley, I need to tell you what happened to me in your house." I will say it without anger, so it lands where it should. I will see her face open, or not. I will hold the next thing carefully, the way I caught the gravy boat tonight. I will be a mother who takes her own seat and offers, gently, to pull up another chair. The coffee shop opens early on Saturdays, the kind of place that does its best with a chalkboard menu and a pastry case that always looks like a promise. I picked the small round table by the window because it lets me watch people decide things, whether to come in, whether to take their coffee to go, whether to add sugar and risk the uneven rise of a day that suddenly tastes different. I set my purse on the chair across from me, a temporary body holding the space for my daughter. If you do not protect a seat, you learn quickly that other people will. Ashley slid in 10 minutes late, hair swept back in that purposeful way that says it has been a busy morning. She smelled like laundry detergent and something citrus. She kissed my cheek as if we were friends in a movie who meet on purpose for lunch, not a mother and a daughter who needed to stitch something torn. "Hi, Mom," she said, breathless. "Sorry. Evan took the kids to the park, and I had to—" She stopped herself, catching the rush. "You look nice." "So do you," I told her. It was mostly true. Tiredness shows itself differently on children you made. It is a little like seeing your own handwriting tilted by a different hand. We ordered coffee because it gave our mouths something to do while our hearts caught up. When the cups came, I wrapped both hands around mine. Heat binds the present to the body. I needed that. Ashley, I began. My voice did that woman thing, softened itself even as it reached for a truth. I want to talk about Thanksgiving. Her shoulders rose an inch and then fell, a tide brave enough to show itself. I figured, she said. Mom, I didn't mean for it to feel the way it did. You mean being pushed from a chair? I surprised both of us. I am careful with words because you cannot take them back. But sometimes you have to set them on the table like the heavy dish in the middle and say, this is what we're passing tonight. Her mouth opened and closed. She looked young suddenly, the girl who used to ask me if I could sit at the end of her bed until she fell asleep, who would smooth the blanket with that same little sigh I've been hearing for 30 years. I told Carol it would be okay, she said finally, voice low. She gets caught up in how things look. She said the head of the table is tradition, and we owe her. She didn't go to Florida, and that was a big deal for her. I thought, she shook her head. I thought it would be an easy way to show her gratitude, I finished for her, because I know the sound of that word in her mouth. It's my word too. Ashley, I am not opposed to gratitude. I'm opposed to disappearing. She flinched, not hard, but like a thin glass in a sink when you set a plate too near it. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. I said that. I know you did, I said. You said it like a charm you could tie to your wrist. Saying we don't want to hurt someone doesn't stop our hands from doing it if we let them. She stared into her coffee as if it had answers. Please don't make this a fight. I am not fighting, I said. And I wasn't. My voice felt steady in my throat, as if the words had finally found a chair that fit them. I am telling you what it felt like to me when my daughter pressed down on my shoulder and told me to move so another woman could sit where I have always sat in your life. I am telling you that I stood at your sink rinsing plates and heard someone praise your boundaries as love. I am telling you that I saw a seating chart and a phone that told me I am a line item you can place and unplace as long as I bring pie. She made a small sound, the one she makes when she is caught between two rooms, and neither is comfortable. Carol is. She's a lot, but she loves us. She's been there this year. Evan lost his job for 3 months, and she helped with the mortgage. She has strong ideas. I feel like I am in the middle of two people who made me. You are, I said simply. That is what happens when daughters grow up and fall in love with people whose mothers also taught them how to sit at tables. You end up with 2 women at your shoulders and 1 chair where the old version of you used to be. I reached across the table and put my fingers over her knuckles. Her hands are familiar to me. They are mine, shaped by different tools. I do not want to be a drama. I want to be your mother. She looked at our hands. The coffee shop played something soft from the speakers, and the young man behind the counter dropped a spoon, and it was the perfect sound, the kind that stops you from pretending you are in a movie that ends neatly. What do you want me to do? She asked. It is a holy question when someone means it. I said slowly, because the truth is a gear you have to line up carefully or you strip it. To be seen as the woman who made you, not just the woman who makes the pie. I want you to call me by my name sometimes, the way you call other adults by theirs. I want to sit somewhere that tells me I am not an afterthought. I want you to be able to say to Carol, I love you and this is my mother, and they are not the same job. And I want to be brave enough to say to you, if I am being set aside to make someone else feel important, I will not participate. Her eyes filled, and she let them. Good. Tears are not failures. They are small, honest rains that find the low places and make things grow there later. I did put Nana on your place card, she said, a crooked smile tilting her mouth. I thought it was tender. It was, I said, and it also erased Margaret. Both are true. I let my hand rest on hers for a heartbeat more, and then pulled it back because this was not a moment to be rescued by touch. She exhaled. Christmas Eve, she said, we always go to Carol's. I know, I said, and I know you want me there. Here is my boundary. I will come if I am given a seat as your mother, not as an afterthought. If I am put by the doorway, I will do what I should have done at Thanksgiving. I will either leave or I will say something. I am too old to let myself be moved like a piece on someone else's board. I don't want a scene, she whispered, the old request leaning forward in her chair, pulling at her hem for modesty. Then you will need to tell Carol before I get there, I said. You will need to set a place for me that says you see me. She nodded, a series of small tilts like someone practicing agreement. Okay, she said. I'll try. No, I'll do it. We talked about other things for a minute because you cannot hold the center of a hard talk too long without it burning your fingers. We let the edges cool. When she left, she hugged me longer than she had in months. At the door, she touched my arm the way she used to when she wanted to tell me a secret in the grocery store. Mom, she said, eyes big, as if she had grown 3 sizes in the time it had taken to drink a coffee. I love you. I know, I said, not as a shrug or a dramatic line, but as a simple fence post, something solid you can see from a distance and walk toward. The weeks before Christmas slid by like a sled on old snow. The mornings were blue and then gray. I made soup. I wrapped a book for each of the kids and tied their packages with twine because ribbon feels like a performance and twine is a promise. One afternoon, my friend Dorothy from church called to ask if I would bring deviled eggs to the potluck, and I laughed because the world is nothing if not consistent. I'll bring them, I said, and a pie. Dorothy harumphed in that satisfying way older women do when they have decided no one is going to talk them out of being straightforward. Bring the pie because you like making pie, not because someone doesn't know how to make one, she said. And sit wherever you feel like sitting. At the elementary school holiday concert, I got there early, as we learned to do back when Ashley had a recorder and an outfit she hated. I claimed the front row on the right, where you can see the little faces without a microphone stand in the way. I draped my blue scarf over the seat beside me because Carol is often late, and I have never been a thief. Ashley texted, running behind. The gym filled with sweaters and the smell of popcorn someone cleverly figured out how to sell to parents who would buy anything to keep their hands busy. When Ashley and the kids came in with Evan and Carol, I stood and waved. I saw the calculation happen behind Ashley's eyes. You can watch love do math if you pay attention. Mom, she said, bending to kiss my cheek. Carol can't stand for long. Would you mind moving back 1 row? Carol was already lowering herself toward the seat like a person entering a bath. I minded. I minded in the way that makes your heart press against your ribs as if it could make more room by knocking. But I also know what it means for a woman in her 70s to stand in a gym on a hard floor for an hour. So I nodded and moved, and when I sat down behind them and saw the back of my granddaughter's head bobbing on stage and watched my grandson's eyes scan the front row and then scan again and then lift to find me, I smiled and raised my hand. He grinned and with both hands gave me a little thumbs up. It steadied me, that small sign. Still, when everyone stood to applaud, I felt like I was clapping from outside a window. After the concert, Carol told a funny story to a cluster of other grandmothers about how she always manages to get the good seats because she brings a pillow, just in case. I remembered the beige metal folding chair at the end of Ashley's table. I remembered the window draft. I went home and stood on a chair to reach the top shelf of the hallway cabinet where I keep things that belong to other times. There, tucked into an old grocery sack, was my mother's gravy boat. I took it down with both hands. It is white with a thin blue line near the lip, not fancy but sturdy. There's a chip on the base where my father bumped it once, putting it back on the table too close to the salt. My mother had laughed and said, "Chip it now so it doesn't have to be nervous." I set it in the sink and washed it gently, circling the inside with a soft cloth the way you touch a hurt shoulder. When you live a long time, objects start to hold the things you forget. The gravy boat remembered every Thanksgiving I want to keep. It remembered my mother in her housecoat at sunrise, stirring pan drippings with flour and whispering to the gravy to smooth out like a lullaby. It remembered me, 28, and newly alone with a girl who preferred cranberry sauce in the shape of a can because you could slice it and make a little sandwich on your fork. I dried it, polished the blue ring with a towel until it shone, and set it on the table. The lamplight caught it and turned it into a small moon. It looked like a promise. It looked like a boat you might cross a river in to get to a better shore. I took the cardboard turkey feather from the kids' school craft. It had Nana written in blue marker, neat and proud, and I tucked it into the gravy boat. That was the thing. That was the line from the past to the now. I would carry this to Christmas Eve, not as a weapon, but as a banner. On the 23rd, Ashley texted, "Mom, dinner is at 6, casual. Please come early if you want. We'll save you a seat." My fingers hovered over the reply. "Thank you," I wrote. "I will be there with something of mine." Carol's house is one of those that looks like it was always waiting for winter. White trim, wreaths on the windows, candles electric but convincing. On Christmas Eve, the driveway had been brushed clean, the lights around the porch were tidy, and there was a bowl of peppermint on the entry table in a silver dish the shape of a leaf. The smell inside was a little sweet and a little fatty and the kind of warm that sits heavy on your shoulders if you stand too close to a stove. Ashley met me with a smile she'd practiced in the mirror, the smile that says, "I'm trying," without saying, "I'm sorry." She reached for the cloth carrier in my arms. "I'll put it in the kitchen," she said. "It comes to the table," I replied gently, and I watched her take that in and nod. She touched the edge of the carrier and smiled at me, the real kind, the one that breaks and shows teeth and relief. Carol came around the corner in a red sweater with a collar that stood up like a quiet trumpet. "Merry Christmas, Margaret," she said. She doesn't often use my name. It sounded almost right in her mouth. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me," I answered. "Your home looks beautiful. Compliments are bridges." We crossed that one carefully. The kids thundered down the hallway, socks sliding on the hardwood, and rammed into me with warm arms and breath like sugar. I have never been ambushed by anything better. Evan took my coat. He looked at me, really looked, the way people do when they remember they have eyes and a mind to use them. "There's a seat for you," he said low, the way men say things when they know who has to say yes. Ashley told us. We went into the dining room together. The table was long, leaves added, cloth ironed. There were place cards with gold edges and names in tidy loops. Nana sat on the left side, 3 seats from the head, next to my grandson. Grandma Carol was at the head. Evan was at the foot. Ashley to Carol's right. To Carol's left, an empty card with Uncle David written and then scratched out because he had decided to go skiing at the last minute. Next to the empty card, a space. And on the chair by that space, a blue scarf, my scarf, draped like it belonged. I stood there for a second and let my chest loosen. The place was not a throne. It was not a test. It was a seat in the heart of the table with my name untied from the grandmother mask and someone small tugging my sleeve. "My seat is next to yours," my grandson whispered, triumphant. My granddaughter took my hand and placed it on the back of the chair as if to say, "See, we saved this island for you in the middle of the sea." Carol noticed. She stood at her place and smoothed her napkin, the way she does before she smooths a room. "We've had a little change to the plan," she said brightly. "Given that David is not joining us, we have some flexibility." "Flexibility is another word for grace," I said, quietly enough that she could hear it more than anyone else. We set the dishes, passed the bread. The turkey was bronze and beautiful. The green beans were her kind with the onions. The sweet potatoes wore their caramelized collars. The salad had pears sliced thin like careful apologies. I set my cloth carrier on the sideboard and lifted out the gravy boat. The blue caught the light. Carol's eyes flicked to the sideboard where her silver gravy boat sat, polished and perfect. "Oh," she said, a little laugh like a pencil scratching out a plan. "We have one, but that is sweet." "It's my mother's," I said, the words not loud but standing up straight. "It holds a lot." I set it on the table within reach of the center, not in front of me, not tucked near my plate, but where a boat belongs, in the middle of a river where everyone can put out a hand. We took our seats. Carol stood with the ease of someone who likes a room to see her. "Shall I?" she asked, a nod toward the quiet overhead. "Grace, may I say something first?" I asked. It surprised me how calm my voice was. It surprised me more to see how many faces turned toward me with the kind of stillness I have begged from rooms for years and rarely gotten. Ashley's hand found Evan's under the table. The children watched me with the trust of people who believe their adults can do hard things and still be kind. Carol paused, then gestured with a hand that, to her credit, didn't tremble. Of course. I stood. Not all the way, because my knees told me the weather had changed overnight, but enough to be a body that chose to take up room. I rested one hand lightly on the back of my chair. With the other, I slid the cardboard feather out of the gravy boat and held it up between finger and thumb, the word Nana shining in a child's hand. My mother taught me a ritual, I said. Not church, though she liked churches because of what they smelled like. Kitchen. She taught me that the gravy is the last thing you tend to, after the bird has rested and the pan is quiet. She showed me how to take what has dripped off the work and turn it into something smooth that makes dry things easier to swallow. A tiny bubble of laughter passed around the table and popped, gentle. This is her gravy boat. It's chipped, so am I. We used it at every holiday, whether there was turkey or 2 little chickens and a pie we hoped wouldn't crack. We passed it hand to hand, and in passing it, we said without saying, "We are here, and there is enough." The room got quieter in the way cold air gets when snow is about to start. Carol's eyes were on the blue ring. Ashley's were on me. Evan looked at his hands as if they were reading Braille. I have been quiet, I continued. I have made myself small because I believed that gratitude required it. I do not regret the ways I have bent. They made room for a girl to become this woman, and look at her. Ashley's face did a little thing then, a flinch and a bloom. But bending isn't the only way to love. Sometimes you have to stand and say, I am here. This is my chair, not the only chair, not the highest chair. A chair that says, I am your mother, and I belong at this table. I don't want to take anything from anyone. I looked at Carol when I said it. Carol, your traditions matter. Your house is beautiful. You love these people with all your particular ways. I can see that. I am not asking you to get up. I am asking us to make sure we have more than one head, more than one heart. And when we cannot, I am asking for a seat that does not push me toward a window. My granddaughter moved her hand toward the feather, as if she could keep it from floating away. I set it back in the boat. The little scrap of cardboard looked suddenly like a flag. Tonight, I said, I need to do something I did not do at Thanksgiving. I need to take my place with my name on it. I looked at the neat loops on the cards. Not only as Nana, that is a name I earned by loving children, but also as Margaret. That is the name my mother gave me when she looked at a brand new face and decided who I might be. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small rectangle I had made at home, cardstock with my name in my own shaky hand. Margaret. I slid it next to the gold-edged Nana and let them sit together like 2 parts of the same song. No one spoke at first. Silence isn't an enemy. It's a blank space you can step into if you're brave. Children understand that. They climbed trees in our silence once upon a time. Evan cleared his throat. Well, he said, a little smile starting like a sunrise you aren't sure you can trust, but you want to. I, for one, like both names. He reached across, and without asking permission from anyone, moved the salt and pepper to make a path for the gravy boat. Ashley cried. Not like a commercial. Eyes full, tears quiet, cheeks damp. She stood too, around her chair, and it made the shape of us. A small rise on each side of the table. Not a standoff, just a lift. Mom, she said, voice breaking on the single syllable. Margaret. She said it as if she were trying on a coat that should have always fit. I am sorry. And then, because this is what matters, thank you for saying it out loud. Carol sat very still. She is not a woman who likes the unplanned. You can tell by her closets. Her fingers smoothed the napkin until it couldn't get any flatter. This is highly... She stopped, reached for a different word. New, she said finally, to her credit. New. New things grow, my grandson said, because children are poets when we let them be. Carol looked at him. Something in her face loosened. You could watch it, the way a tight knot in a ribbon lets go, just enough that you can pull the package open without tearing paper. I do not want, she said carefully, to be someone who makes anyone feel moved. She shut her eyes for a second, as if she were listening to herself. When she opened them, she met mine. You may pass your boat, Margaret. It was not a surrender. It was not triumph. It was a small hinge swinging. Thank you, I said. I reached for the spoon. I am my mother's daughter. I had brought one because spoons at other people's houses are never quite the right size. I poured the first bit of gravy onto Ashley's plate, the way my mother always did for me. The sound of it hitting the turkey skin was its own comfort. I passed the boat to Carol. She took it with both hands. That mattered. We ate. The gravy did what gravy does. It softened edges. Conversation found its level. The kids told a story in turns the way siblings do when they cannot wait for the other to stop talking. Evan laughed at something real. Ashley reached under the table and squeezed my knee. Carol told one of her many good stories about a parade in Savannah when she was 19, and the sky looked like glass. When it was time for dessert, she turned to me. "Do you have a pie?" she asked. And the way she asked made it not a demand and not a habit. It made it a bridge. "I do," I said. "Two, actually." I felt lighter in my chair than I have in months, as if some quiet had been lifted from my shoulders and placed where it belongs, in a room that knows how to hold it. Later, when the dishes were stacked and the kids flung themselves at the tree like it had magnets. When the men carried chairs back to their places and the lights made everything twice as lovely, I stood in the doorway with Ashley. She had that expression on her face, the one she had when she watched her babies sleep and thought she invented breathing. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I have been careless with you." "I have been complicit," I answered. "I am not faultless in my own erasure. I let the velvet kind of rudeness lay on me and said it was a blanket. I forgot that my name needs to be spoken out loud for it to stay in the room." She shook her head, ready to argue with me on my behalf. I smiled. "We start where we are," I said. "Tonight we made a place. That is enough for now." When I left, the night was clear and cold. The stars did that thing they do in December, where they seem closer. I carried the cloth carrier close to my chest. The gravy boat nestled inside, warm from hands, and one small amount of gravy left in the bottom like a leftover of love. I set it on the passenger seat again, as if it were a person. At a light, my phone buzzed. A picture. The table, the cards, Nana and Margaret side by side in the small gold frame of a place that finally made sense. It didn't end there, of course. Things don't. There were still moments. In January, Carol sent me a text with a link to a set of linen napkins without monograms and a note. "Would these work for Easter? Maybe we could do initials next year. Both?" It made me smile standing in the aisle of the grocery store by the canned tomatoes. In February at the kids' school, Ashley saved me a seat without my having to arrive an hour early. In March, we missed each other for a week and fell into old patterns, and I had to remind her. In April, I burned a pie crust, and we laughed and ate it anyway, and no one legislated the seating because once a rule is named, it can be tended. But the break and the mend live on Christmas Eve for me. They live in a blue ring and a chipped base and a little cardboard feather that for all its childishness held something truer than most grown-up words. That feather sits now on my bookcase, tucked into a glass where I keep pencils and an old pair of reading glasses that have outlived their usefulness. Every now and then, I pluck it up and stroke the edge with my thumb. It pricks a little. Paper can. It reminds me that tenderness is not the same as absence. It reminds me that gratitude can stand upright. It reminds me that the head of the table is wherever I set down the thing that holds what dripped off the hard work and turned it into something we could all swallow without scraping. The day after Christmas, Ashley and the kids came by my apartment. We made turkey sandwiches with too much cranberry sauce, and the kids took off their socks even though I told them it was cold, and the Christmas lights I finally dragged down from the top of the refrigerator glowed like small planets strung in a line. Ashley stood at my little sink and washed my pie plates, turned and handed me one with a tea towel without telling me how to stack them. We didn't talk about the seating chart, or the phone call, or the closet, or the monogrammed napkins. We didn't have to. The new chart was the way she stood in my kitchen and did not manage me. The way she looked over her shoulder and said, "Mom?" Like a question she wanted to keep asking. On New Year's Day, I took the gravy boat down and put it on the table with no food in sight. I poured water into it and set a sprig of evergreen inside, and a branch of red berries I had found on a walk, and a small paper star the children had cut. You can make centerpieces out of anything if you remember that the center of a piece is the story it tells. I sat at the table and wrote a letter to my mother in my head. I told her that her boat made it to another table, that the blue ring gleamed under different lights, that a woman with a red sweater and a firm way of smoothing napkins held my mother's boat like something fragile and important. I told her that I have learned to be gracious in a way I did not understand when I was young. Not by going along to get along, but by telling the truth without making it a weapon. People talk about boundaries as if they are lines you draw in permanent marker. Mine are a set of chairs and a gravy boat and a daughter who learned to say my name again. Mine are a blue scarf left intentionally on an empty seat to hold it. Mine are a child's handwriting saying Nana that I kept, because titles are not cages if you remember to climb out through the door sometimes and walk around with your old name like a coat you took off when the room got hot and need to put on again when the window is cracked and the draft needles your back. I do not know what next Thanksgiving will look like. Maybe we will be at Ashley's. Maybe Carol will go to Florida. Maybe we will be at my place, with our knees bumping the undersides of a table that was meant for 4 and will hold 8, because we will decide it can. What I know is I will bring the gravy boat, and I will set it down where hands can find it. I will stand for a second if I need to. I will choose to speak before I am pushed. I will pass what I have. It won't be perfect. The boat chips, the gravy skins, if you forget to stir. You skim and you stir and you count to 30 and you add a little water if it gets thick. That is how you keep something moving. That is how you keep from burning. If you ask me now when the enough happened, I will not say the shove, even though it was sharp and humiliating and my hip still remembers. I will say it happened in a gym with a plastic chair under my coat and a little boy scanning rows and rows for my face. I will say it happened in a closet with a box that wasn't meant for me and a tag with someone else's name. I will say it happened in my kitchen with my mother's boat in my hands and a cardboard feather turning from a child's craft into a flag. It was a dozen tiny straws that broke nothing until they did. And then I set the broken thing down and decided for once not to tape it quietly in the back room. I decided to take it to the front and show the crack and say, "We can still use this. We can still set the table and sit, not because someone else is watching and measuring, but because this is the family we are when no one is. I am Margaret. I am Mom. I am Nana." All 3 fit in my mouth now without me swallowing any of them. When I say grace these days, I begin with thank you, because so much of the world is a flat no until you lay your body down like a bridge and let someone cross. But I end with make room, because that is what love is when you do it on purpose. It is chairs and cards and plates and boats. It is making room, even if that means moving someone else's monogram to make space for your own cracked dish in the middle. It is saying, with all the velvet and crash it requires, I will not be erased. And then, in the ordinary miracle of a shared meal, passing the gravy. It is saying, with all the velvet and crash it requires, I will not be erased. And then, in the ordinary miracle of a shared meal, passing the gravy. The first thing that happened after the boat left my hands was the kind of ordinary conversation that stitches a room back together. Someone asked for a second slice of pie. A child announced that Santa would definitely fit down their chimney because they had a plan involving a ladder. And Evan made a joke about Aunt Carol's lemon bars that had everyone laughing at once. The sound of people laughing for real was its own small miracle. It unglued the tension that had pooled under our shoes. It didn't erase the memory of the push at Thanksgiving, and it shouldn't have. We were not pretending nothing had happened. We were rather sitting in the truth of it and deciding we would not be reduced to that moment. Carol passed the gravy back with both hands. For a few seconds, her fingers hovered where mine had been. I saw the calculation in them, the same one I used to make when I smoothed my daughter's hair before a recital, trying to make everything okay. Then she smiled in a way that wasn't a performance and said, "Thank you, Margaret," with my name in it like a small gift. It landed somewhere steady inside me. On the ride home, the car smelled like evergreen and butter. I held the cloth carrier on my lap like a small, warm thing. In the passenger seat, the gravy boat sat wrapped in towels, the blue ring blinking like a lighthouse. I thought about the years where I would have put that boat in a back room and told myself it was nothing, that it was better to be kind than seen. That night, I didn't tuck anything away. I set the boat on my kitchen table when I got home, took off my coat, and sat for a long time with the quiet. My shoulders relaxed for the first time in months, as if they had been braced against a door all day and now could finally lean back. The consequences of Christmas Eve didn't come as fireworks. They came as small weather changes, subtle, cumulative. The week after, Carol messaged me, cautiously, with a photo of napkins, plain linen with a delicate hem, and a note. "Maybe we could do initials next year? Both?" The text could have been stiff or formal. Instead, it was warm, like someone reaching a hand across a table and resting it there. I answered, "Yes, both," and typed a little smiley because even my texts have to be a trifle domestic. A few days later, at the kids' school for another program, this time a Valentine's craft sale where my granddaughter insisted we buy the glitter hearts, I found that Ashley had saved me the right seat without making a show of it. She caught my eye and mouthed, "Save," with a little tilt of her head. It was the word my daughter has always used when she wants me to know she remembers. I sat, and the concert didn't feel like a window this time. It felt like a place I fit into. January arrived with a brittle kind of light. Evan's job stabilized after a month or two of uncertainty. He started contract work that let him be more present than he had been when the mortgage was tight and tempers shorter. Carol and I began to trade recipes in texts, her lemon bars, my cranberry sauce with the clove, and it was disarmingly domestic. Sometimes she would add a little line at the end, like, "Also, Margaret, can you remind Ashley about the date for the school fundraiser?" She had learned how to cajole without commandeering. It took time, but people can change when they are asked gently and given a way in. At home, the gravy boat found a permanent place on my sideboard, where the lamplight turned the blue ring into a quiet halo each evening. I used it as a pen holder for a while, then as a vase for a single sprig of forsythia in early spring. My mother would have liked the idea that something could be useful in different seasons. The boat had always been more than pottery. It was a ledger of the work that holds a family. When I reached for it now, I felt the kind of ownership that isn't loud. It was not about possession so much as presence. Spring brought a small, unforeseeable joy. The elementary school asked for volunteers for a Grandparents and Special Friends Story Day. I signed up before I could think too long about whether I would be the kind of person who sat in front of a room of kindergartners and read. Ashley texted back, "That's so sweet. The kids will love it." On the day, I brought my mother's gravy boat, filled not with gravy, but with small paper slips. Each slip had a prompt. Tell us your favorite food memory. What do you like to do on a rainy day? Who is someone you admire? The children took turns pulling one and sharing answers that were exuberant and tiny and perfect. At the end, one of the boys raised his hand and said, "My Nana has a gravy boat. It's blue." Someone in the back of the room clapped. I clapped with them. In that laughter, I felt less like an afterthought and more like a chapter someone else liked reading. When the weather warmed enough for porch visits, I started to host a monthly Sunday lunch. Just sandwiches, deviled eggs, sweet tea, inviting neighbors and friends, and sometimes, if the timing worked, Ashley and the kids. One particular afternoon, Carol arrived with a tub of lemon bars wrapped in waxed paper. She set them on my tiny kitchen table and said, "I thought these might taste better at your house." For the first time since Thanksgiving, I didn't measure the kindness to see what else it might cost. I accepted it. We ate and talked about nothing heavy, the kind of conversation that builds a foundation underneath you. In August, there was a small crisis of the kind that makes you see how people behave when the script goes off page. My hot water heater broke. It flooded the bathroom tiles, and for a full week, I had no shower warm enough to unknot my shoulders. I called a plumber with a recommended from church, and then I called Ashley because, at 72, I still like to be dramatic about things. She came over with the kids in tow, and Carol dropped by on the way to a book club. Somehow, the sight of 3 generations piled on my couch, with children playing tangram puzzles in the middle of our chaos, felt less like an invasion and more like a rescue. Evan carried the old heater out the back while his mom and my daughter made coffee. Carol and I peeled the wallpaper in the guest bathroom together because there is a strange intimacy to shared domestic labor. We laughed at our mismatched efforts. When the plumber left, he shook his head and called it a good haul in a municipal voice, but I felt like the one who had gained a small village. I learned to keep saying my name. That wasn't an instruction as much as a habit I made for myself. When the kids came over to do homework, Ashley would sometimes say in the doorway, "Margaret, could you make room at the table?" And she meant it. She included my surveys and texted me sneak photos of the kids with messages like, "They miss you," or "Grandma's soup is better than cafeteria soup, FYI. Her friendship with Carol softened into something more functional, more adult. They planned only some holidays in concert now. Others were approvals without drama. We traded off hosting duties with a willingness that had been learned. It felt like a new choreography, one in which everyone had at least 2 steps to take. When September came around again, I found myself standing in my kitchen making a turkey stock while the TV showed football highlights. The smell of simmering bones and onions swelled through the apartment, and I realized how accustomed I had become to filling my world with work that matters in small ways. My daughter called to ask about cranberries and whether the children could come over early to help make napkin rings. Her voice sounded younger now, not because time reversed, but because permission had been granted. She had loosened herself enough that she could be kinder without forfeiting her place. "Mom," she said on the phone, "would you be open to hosting Thanksgiving this year? Just us, small. I think it would be nice." My hands tightened on the wooden spoon. I thought of my mother, stirring gravy in a bathrobe at dawn, and of my father's laugh from across a battered table. I thought of the day I had been shoved into a window seat and how the memory still had the shrillness of a bell if I let it ring. I also thought of the months of negotiations and soft repairs, of a family that had learned to be more deliberate. My answer surprised me with its clarity. "I would like that," I said. "I would like us to sit close and not have to worry about maps. Bring whatever you like. Carol is welcome if she wants to come. But if she does, she must be ready to sit with me and help pass the gravy." There was a pause on the line, then a laugh from Ashley that was almost a sob. "Of course," she said. "Of course, Mom. We'll make it our day." The last Thanksgiving, my own, at my own table, wasn't cinematic. There was no perfect gold leaf banner or a choir hiding behind the fridge. It was pies with slightly cracked crusts, deviled eggs that looked like they had been marshaled by committee, and a stuffing that ran a little wetter than the recipe required. I found myself humming along to the game on TV while carving the turkey because habit is a kind of hymn. Carol did come. She placed a small dish of lemon bars on the sideboard and said, "Margaret, everything smells wonderful." She arrived without ceremony and with something like candor. She sat at my table in a plain way that assumed nothing and offered everything. Before we ate, I lifted the gravy boat and held it out. The blue ring glowed in the noon light. "This is the boat my mother used," I said. "She taught me to tend the last thing into the meal. If we pass it, it means we share the work and the thanks." I set it on the table so everyone could reach it. We talked, we listened. Evan told the story about the job that had been a mess and how he'd learned to pay attention to the small things, like turning off the stove and calling his mother. The kids performed a tiny play about pilgrims and pumpkins that ended with my granddaughter handing me a paper crown she'd made. Carol made a quiet announcement that she'd asked someone from her club to bring a casserole next year so she could come to my house for dessert. That was an olive branch in the language of casseroles. When it was time for grace, I stood. I looked at each face. My daughter with flour on her wrist. My grandchildren with cheeks sticky from pie. My son-in-law with a small trade in his expression. Carol with a lemon bar at the ready. "Thank you," I began, and the words were simple and full. For work that's done and hands that hold it. For the stories we bring, old and new, and make room. I said it on purpose, a soft command that felt more like a benediction than an ultimatum. We passed the gravy, we passed the stories. When the last plate was scraped clean, no one hurried to tuck me away. No one crowned anyone. We sat a little longer, letting conversation fold and refold until it felt like something woven. After that dinner, life did not become perfect. People are messy, and so are marriages and friendships. There were still moments when someone defaulted to old patterns and the lurch came again. Once in the spring, I heard that old velvet rudeness trying to settle at the edges when a family friend asked where I would be for a group event. Someone suggested I might be more comfortable not coming since the seating was limited. I said calmly, "If I'm invited, I will come," and put my name on the RSVP. It was not aggressive. It was simply a line kept. The gravy boat stayed on my sideboard, sometimes with pencils, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with the cardboard feather tucked inside like a talisman. It has become a kind of lighthouse for me, a small, cracked thing that lets people know there is an anchorage here if they need it. When I look at it, I remember that belonging is not a single place, but a series of acts. Names spoken, chairs saved, pies brought, boundaries kept. The boat reminds me to steward the work that makes family possible. My daughter and I have had more conversations since that Christmas Eve than we had in years. We talk, sometimes awkwardly, about the ways we were raised. We talk about money and favors and the small resentments that can grow like mold if you don't air the house. She asks after my day, not as a perfunctory question, but because she wants to hear the answer. She calls me Margaret sometimes on purpose, and when she does, it feels like she is saying to the world, "There is the woman who raised me." It is a gift to be named. When people ask me now what I learned from the Thanksgiving I was pushed at, I tell them the truth. I learned that being polite is not the same as being present. I learned that you can be tender and firm at the same time. I learned that traditions are wonderful until they become rules that erase a person. I also learned that you can build new traditions if you are brave enough to put a chair in the middle of a room and say, gently, "This is mine too." The gravy boat is a small ceramic thing with a blue ring. It cannot solve everything. It chips. It needs washing. It will not stop a foot from accidentally knocking over a glass. But it does what it has always done. It holds what drips off the work and makes it whole enough to pass. I pass it now with both hands and with an intention that is older than me, to take care of what is on the table and who is at it. If you take anything from my story, I hope it is this: names matter, seats matter. The smallest objects hold the largest stories. You do not have to make yourself small to make others comfortable. There is room at a table when someone decides there will be. There is grace in insisting on being seen. There is a kind of freedom, gentle and strong, in saying, "I belong here." If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear. Have you ever had to reclaim a place at your table? Share your story in the comments. Your words might help someone else feel brave. If you found a little comfort in this, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about family, courage, and the quiet work of making room. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for making space. Remember, hold your name in your mouth like a warm spoon, and when you pass what you have, do it with both hands.